Welcome to prime time, bitch. I'm Liam, he's Rob, and for the final part of the October season of Halloween podcast, we are looking back at 1987's Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Arguably the finest of the Nightmare sequels, it's undoubtedly the most imaginative, and from a purely tonal perspective, was certainly the last time that Freddy was as scary as he was funny. Now, Rob, this is the movie I'd say of all the Nightmare films, the one I've seen the most, and other than the first one, obviously, the one I've got the greatest attachment to. Is that the same for you, or?
Yeah, so this is the one I've seen the most, and it's the one I think of more fondly. Like I know the names of most of them. I can't tell you what happens in, like, was it Freddy as a child, or
Dream Child, the final
or
chapter.
Freddy chases a bus full of teenagers, all that stuff.
You mean the gay one, Freddy's Revenge?
That's the one.
Yeah.
The only other one I remember fondly is the one that not a lot of people liked, which is Freddy's Dead.
Because really? The last of the original movies.
The one with Yaphet Kotto, who looks a bit like older Kincaid.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like they made him have the same hair, the same. Like I remember,
I'm just amazed.
Was that Kincaid who grew up? But
you might be the only person who has fond memories of.
I like it. I like the fighting at the end. I like it as well. And I know this is the 3, not the 6 podcast, but I do like it at the end of the last film, Freddy's Dead, when she blows him up with a pipe bomb, and he just looks into the camera and goes, "Kids." For some reason, it just makes me laugh.
Well, that's the thing. It depends what you're expecting from a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I suppose. And it's probably the reason that I love this one so much is because I feel like of the sequels, it's the one that got the tone bang on. Because obviously the first movie is played more like a traditional horror. Obviously, Freddy's always been a larger-than-life character in many respects. But, you know, there's fun to be had with The Dream Child, with the final chapter, with these films. But by that point, he's become a bit of a cartoon character.
He's a buffoon.
Watch it he is a buffoon. You can watch it in a different way and you can enjoy it. But in this one, it's where the kind of, it just fell into that right balance of, he is starting to deliver those one-liners. He is quite funny at times, but everything's still delivered with a sense of malice. And more importantly, he is still scary in this film. It's scary within the realms of, rewatching a film from 1987, of course. Some things age better than others. But the premise has always been inherently terrifying to me, at least.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, the last time that Freddy was, like, genuinely scary. Other than, of course, obviously, there was, like, the New Nightmare, which was, the kind of progenitor to Scream. That was a fantastic idea, and I think that's being kind of revisited by a lot of people and reappraised. But of the original 6, I thought this was easily the best of the sequels, even if it's not quite the equal of the original film.
Wholeheartedly agree. And what I like about this one, it seems to... Well, it should have ended the whole I'm the last child of the person that murdered Freddy, but they decided to carry it on from what I can remember. Or did they? Because, like, the child then was Freddy was coming back through somebody's child who was the dream.
But what I like increasingly silly,
yeah, but we're the kids of the people, we're the last of the kids of the people that killed Freddy. So it's kind of ending. So you can look at it as a trilogy. That's absolutely fine. I get, but it's really good. From mostly the effects, I love the effects right up until the Jason and the Argonaut style fight.
When it goes full Ray Harryhausen for the last one. I totally forgot about that. And I was like, all the way through, I was exactly the same as you. I'm watching it, I'm like, man, the physical effects in this film are so good. The kills are so imaginative, which we'll obviously go into more detail. But then the final act of this film, it has a bit of a wobble, needless to say. But yes, the Harryhausen skeleton sequence doesn't age fantastically well. It hasn't aged fantastically well, sorry.
Everything looks great, and I love the practicalness. Like, it hasn't aged it at all. When you get right at the beginning, you get the tap knives. I thought they were fucking the way the handles of the knives bend and the taps bend
in the bathroom.
And the knives come out in the bathroom. Yeah. I think they look great. The way budget Sean Astin gets his veins ripped out of him, and
he does look like a budget Sean Astin. He totally does. Yeah, I was watching. I was just like, this guy looks familiar. It's because he looks like Sean Astin. He looks like a budget Sean Astin. Exactly
he was one of Ace's guys in. He was
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me.
That's what I was thinking of. That's what I was grasping for.
You don't recognize him because he's got longer hair in this one. And what was he says in Stand By Me? You let him beat you, dickwad, or something like that. I can't remember.
It's a couple of cool lines.
Yeah, but he does. But then, that looks great. The whole vein thing. Kincaid's a bit of a dick. Mind. Like, you know, there's a
Yeah,
dream guy trying to kill you. You know he's sleepwalking. Maybe put two and two together and wake the fucker up.
yeah. I mean, Kincaid, they always kind of like pass him off as the guy who's like fighting against it the most. He doesn't want to
Yeah.
deal with it. He's like, this is bullshit. It's just dreams. Like, he has that one fantastic line. Great, now it's my dick that's killing me. When everyone's trying to convince him otherwise, and he feels like the one for most of the film was just like, this is bullshit. Does it like he's like big, this big tough guy, but he's inherently maybe the most scared of all of them. And they don't maybe have enough time because this is a relatively short film, which I don't have an issue with. The fact that this is the best part of 90 minutes is absolutely ideal as far as I'm concerned. When it comes to horror films, unless it's one of these highfalutin horror films, I just don't think it needs to be longer than an hour and 40. Same as like action movies for the most part. But there are there is a version of this movie where you could go deeper into each individual character. I mean, let's be honest though, if you had more time, you'd spend more on Amanda Krueger, whose storyline pops up and then just disappears, which is just bizarre. And I don't know, like the whole hospital setup is quite interesting, but again, the premise is fantastic, but you don't maybe spend enough time with the kids. Although the opposite side of that coin is the fact that despite the limited screen time, they all have an impact. And that is one of the most important parts of this film. We mentioned it last week when we did The Leprechaun. As fun and silly as it might be, one of its great issues is there just simply aren't enough people to kill off. And even the best, you think of other horror films where you may have 10 people to kill off, whatever. One of the big issues is that they're not interesting, so you don't care when they die. Everyone in this film has an impact. So when they do get killed off, you're like, fuck, I wasn't expecting that. I actually forgot that, what's his name? The guy who's got his tendons ripped out, which arguably might be the best death. And maybe I'd argue in the whole saga, it's in the conversation for best death sequence in the whole saga. I always remember the whole Krueger puppet sequence.
He was Philip, but we will forever know him as Budget Sean Austin.
Budget Sean. So yeah, when Budget Sean Austin dies, it's really early in the film. And maybe it is just because he looks like a Budget Sean Austin, but he is memorable in his own unique way. And I think that's the same for nearly all the kids. They all have a moment. So when they do get killed off, and the majority do indeed get killed off, you're like, God damn. And of course, the most important thing is when they do get killed off, it's in super imaginative ways. And I think that's ultimately this movie's greatest success. It's a solid premise. It's totally fantastic. But that doesn't count for shit if the deaths aren't interesting. Luckily, in this film, it has some of the series' best, without question.
He's the one that speaks sense anyway, because in the group session, he's the one that comes up with, look, we all know why we're here, but you keep disbelieving us. So we're going around in circles constantly. So he's the one that gives you we know why we're here, you don't believe us. So, and then it feels like then Freddy knows, oh, this guy's speaking sense, I'll take him out first. Because as soon as he says that, he's the one that gets taken out next.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
So I do. He does have his memorable moment and then gets taken out in a really good way. Even that weird double screen effect where and fucking hell, what was the kid in the wheelchair? What was his name? Will, was it? Will,
yeah.
Will takes that, I don't know, glass out with no problem whatsoever with the lamp.
Yeah.
And then he's shouting for Philip to wake up. And then everyone's watching Philip. And it just seems to be that the only people that got affected by it were the kids. Because even though Joey's running around destroying everything, nobody decides to run to the room until the last minute. But then it gets to Freddy at the end, and he cuts the tendons, he cuts the marionette strings, and Philip falls. Even that
sequence is so fucked up. But when it tears out of his arms initially, and you see it tear out of his legs, and you get those real close-ups. Even to this day, because again, it comes back to the fact that they use physical effects, means that it just looks fantastic, and it is as gross as it ever was.
He did it so well as well when he's holding his hands, and you can because his wrists are like floppy because he's no longer got any fucking tendons in there.
It's great.
It's really good.
It also reminds you in that section, obviously Freddy's the bad guy, but the real shithouses in this movie, it's like Dr. Sims, the lead psychiatrist, she's just the fucking worst. She just will not listen. Yeah. And if anything, I'd say Dr. What's his face? Dr. Neil, he maybe goes too far the other way. He goes to he's pretty reasonable about it. It's like, well, of course this is nonsense. Why would I believe in a ghost, dream killer guy? Yeah. But then when he decides to get on board, fuck me, does he go two-footed on it? He's suddenly just all in. But Dr. Sims is horrendous. The pervy porter who's hitting on what's the name? Taryn. He kind of comes and goes, but he's just the fucking worst. And then the worst of the bunch might actually be Kristen's mum. When obviously
she's fucking awful.
Oh, she's
Like
just the worst.
she's just
When
doing it
Nancy
for
goes to see
attention.
her, she's like, "Oh, my daughter's just the worst." Like such, And again, there's an interesting story there. It's kind of conflicts with itself because there are sequences when Mum comes home and she's actually pretty cool with Kristen, and then other sequences like that with Nancy where she just seems like the worst mum of all time. But yeah,
But
it seems to be the
I think
parents and the folks working at the actual.
I think the
I
ones
don't
where
want to
she
say
comes home,
madhouse.
I
What
think the
was
ones where she comes home and she's cool with Krista Mine, they're the dream parts. I
it?
don't think that's actually. I think her mum's just a
No,
shithouse in
there
fucking
is
real life.
that. But earlier in the film, they maybe suggest that she's not a complete bellend. But yeah, that sequence with Nancy and the whole thing with Nancy is inherently quite hilarious because I was like, whatever happened to Heather Langenkamp? And I was watching this film. And I always loved Heather Langenkamp because she's so pretty. She almost looks like a slightly B-grade Cindy Crawford. Maybe it's like the
Yeah,
hair and stuff. But you watch this film and you're like, oh yeah, there's a reason she wasn't in loads of other films. She's not a very good
she's
actress.
terrible.
She's
I mean,
quite terrible.
spoiler for my hates. She's fucking awful. Like her soft spokenness and the way she's trying to convey terror and everything. It's like, love, you're
She's
bad.
not
You are
fantastic. Maybe
bad.
I gave her more of a free pass in the first one because she was like 17 years old. And it
Yeah.
probably doesn't help that they roll out Heather Langenkamp or Nancy in this film like she's 70 years old. Like she's got that
Mm.
little shock of grey in her hair. But they suggest that this movie is 6 years after the original. That makes her like 24 at most. And they're playing it out like she's like this fucking grand old lady with all the experience in the world just rolling into town. And I know she's obviously had experience with Freddie, but I don't know if she's getting so much purchase at the psychiatric hospital, why everybody's paying attention to her. But geez Louise.
You're 24 as well. You're absent from your father's life.
Mhm.
Maybe the first time you see him, don't call him daddy again. It's
It's a
gross.
bit creepy, isn't it? It's a bit creepy. But yeah, that was one of the things I was maybe most surprised by going back and rewatching it. Because of course, like one of the things that probably jumps out to you is that this film has a really good cast. Like
Yeah.
Patricia Arquette's one of those people. She never quite got to the A list, but there are moments in this film which remind you, so like, there was a reason she was pushed quite a bit when she was younger, and she got some relatively major roles. And obviously, Lawrence Fishburne in a surprisingly small role in this film.
Sorry, so who?
Not have I got that
Who?
wrong?
No,
What did I say?
he's credited as Larry Fishburne.
Oh, Larry Fishburne, of course. Larry Fishburne, my mistake. I thought I had done one of those horrible things where I'd mixed up two black guys. I was like, wait, is it actually Samuel L. Jackson? And I've got it wrong. Fucking hell.
He's
I
credited.
panicked
Like,
there for a second.
he went as Larry for a while, didn't he? Before he decided, you know what, Lawrence is better.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I thought I'd done that terrible cracker thing where I'm just mixing up black folk. But no, although speaking of black folk, I don't know what to feel about Kincaid in this movie because at first I was like, there's this like wonderful like contradiction between his size and his voice, which is very high
Thank you. I
pitched.
wrote that down. What is going on with his voice? It's like
I
his
don't
balls have
know.
finally decided to half drop. It was weird.
But then they keep playing him off as this big tough guy. But then I'm watching the film, especially towards the end, you suddenly realize he's not actually much taller than Nancy and
No.
Kristen.
And
And
when
you're
he
like, how big is this guy? I'm not sure if he's as tough as he makes out.
when he tried to show his strength as well, you think that's good? Watch me bend this chair. Okay, it's going. It's going.
Well, we'll get to the magic powers, which were, I mean, one of them is, Will, it turns into the lamest wizard of all time. He's just dressed like a fucking magician. His powers do jack shit. And Kristen, she can like do backflips and stuff. I mean,
What's that power?
I feel like maybe you could be a little bit more imaginative with the power. And don't be wrong, this film is inherently incredibly imaginative, and that's
But
why it
Taron's
stood the test
powers
of
were
time.
awful. Taron's powers, I can have a really long mohawk and two flick knives, but for some reason my track marks become sucky,
Well,
weird
those
jellyfish things.
are gross. And that is at the heart of this film, the fantastic Freddy sequences. So I've got like six, and there are more, but the key six that certainly jumped out to me. So there's the giant snake penis and barking pig opening, and this comes after the initial opening where Kristen goes into the house for the first time in a dream, which is, again, really effective, really inventive. Obviously, you've seen it before. But you've got like the hung teens. That sounds so much more dodgy than I had planned. But you know what I mean? Like the room where they're all hung.
Yeah.
And, it kind of ticks all the boxes for a classic Nightmare on Elm Street film, but the fact that, it hits the ground running, but then you do get the giant snake penis, which they actually toned down a little bit because the director was like, this looks a little bit too much like a penis. It still looks a lot like a penis eating Chris in that sequence, but a little less so than initially planned. The barking pig thing, he just literally thought, the director's like, oh, we'll just have the pig barking, which was supposedly harder to do than you think, but it just made it a fucking really creepy sequence. There was the Freddy the Puppet Master we've already referenced, the Freddy TV sequence, which we will get to because there are some questions there. Joey's sex tongue sequence, which is very odd. Joey's a bit of a perv in this film, by the way. And the one you already mentioned, Taryn and the needle marks, which is, like you said, her powers are silly. But the sequence when she looks down and all of her paws are kind of like, seeping isn't the right word. I don't know how you describe it. It's fucking gross is what it is.
It's not good, is it?
And then, of course, for better and for worse, there's Donald versus the Evil Dead at the end of the film, which isn't fantastic, but it is kind of fun in its own way. Although I'd say I prefer the mirror sequence right before Nancy does the dumbest thing in the entire movie. But again, we will get to that. I guess the most important... Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. So I know again, you mentioned at the beginning, right? You mentioned Will dressing up as the lamest magician ever.
So
do you know who he reminded me of?
Who's that?
So there's a film from 1992.
Here we go.
Starring, do you know who Jeffrey Combs is? You know Jeffrey Combs, yeah?
Reanimator. This is going to be From the Vault, isn't it?
You know Jeffrey Combs is? Reanimator?
Yes. Yeah.
So he signed on to do a Doctor Strange film.
Mm-hmm.
Then they realized, whilst filming, they don't have the rights to Doctor Strange. Fantastic. So they said, "It's fine. We'll change it to Dr. Mordred."
Brilliant. Right? That's a much better name, Dr. Mordred.
And when Dr. Mordred is in his full "I'm a wizard" doctor get-up, it looked like Will from this film.
Well, that's terrible as well, I'm
awful,
sure. And the fact that it's called Dr. Mordred, that's such a bad... Of all the names you could have picked, you go from Doctor Strange to Dr. fucking Mordred. Give me a break. Yeah, that's... In fact, most of their powers... Let's be honest, like the whole film is predicated on this idea of like, all right, we're taking the standard premise of, the teens fighting against or trying to survive Freddy. Only in this film, they have magic powers. They have their dream powers. They're nearly universally useless. And I would argue if it wasn't for Dr. Neil and Nancy's father, Donald, at the end of the film, they would have all just died anyway. So I'm just like, what? Like, he does the magic powers, gets immediately killed. What's her name? Tyra. I keep forgetting her name. It's not Tyra. Taryn.
Taryn.
Taryn shows up with a knives, acting all badass. She gets fucked up immediately, and I'm just like, what are these magic powers achieving? It gives them a little bit of confidence to go after Freddy, but all it does is get them dead immediately. I'm just in the mindset that a pair of running trainers would have been much more successful. But hey ho.
Why isn't your magic power like a fucking Uzi?
Yeah, something. Just something more useful. Oh, I've got magic powers. And even if you have those little knives, it's like when you have two, I don't know, bigger knives, perhaps, and that hair is just getting in the way.
To be fair, mind, they didn't think a lot of like the magic powers. The other thing they didn't think a lot of was when, what's his name, Dr. Gordon is talking to the nun who turns out to be Freddy's mother.
Is it Dr. Gordon? I've got Dr. Neil. Is it Dr. Neil Gordon? Is that
Dr. Neil Gordon? Sorry,
okay, yeah. No, that's fine. I just want to make sure.
When he's talking to the mother,
Amanda Krueger,
when he's talking to her in where Joey, not Joey, Philip apparently jumped from his death. She starts relaying the story of the nun and Freddy, like she was hidden, and she turned around and she said, "He's the bastard son of 100 maniacs." Now, I'm not too sure the writers of this film know how sex works or how having a child works, because I don't think all of their DNA mixes into one sperm to go into the egg.
Yeah, I think she meant more on a thematic level. I think we are dealing with, magic. But yeah, like even if 100 dudes run a train on you, and that is a very unkind way of putting what happened to that poor lady into context, but only one of them's hitting the home run. That's it.
Yeah.
It's just going to be one of these assholes rather than 100. Yeah. On a biological level, no, it doesn't make any sense. The whole storyline doesn't make sense. Like if you're going to do the whole Amanda Krueger, I was his mother, blah, blah, blah. For one, half of them should be at least half decent because his mum's a fucking nun. But also you feel like deal with that part of the story. Instead, it's just her and Dr. Neil, who's just, seeing ghosts now, no big deal. And then they almost they forget that Amanda Krueger's a thing. And at the end of the film, when Nancy's dead, spoiler alert, Nancy dies, he just suddenly looks over and goes, and there's just a headstone there for Amanda Krueger. Oh, she's dead. She was never
telling me
alive.
as well.
Credits.
You're telling me as well that Nancy never once questioned, like at the funeral of whose funeral did they go to? The woman and the girl in the TV.
Yeah.
What was her name? Yeah. At
Oh,
her
well,
funeral, he's by the tree, right? And he's talking to Mrs. Krueger at that point. Nancy comes walking over to him. So she is so close to him. He is apparently talking to himself. And she doesn't go,
Jennifer, sorry.
Jennifer. So he's apparently talking to himself. And she doesn't go, who are you talking to? Like, what are you doing? Like, I can clearly see your lips moving. I can hear the words you're saying because I'm next to you.
Yeah, they're trying to play off this whole sixth sense thing. I guess the idea is that Nancy could probably see her as well, maybe, but they just both don't know. Excuse me, that she's dead. It's like I said, it's a little bit silly. That sequence doesn't really work. The whole Donald showing up right at the end to go on his little adventure with Dr. Neil feels like enforced. They should have kept the emphasis on the kids in the psychiatric hospital. Like that's where the core of the film is. That's where when I think of this film, that's what I think. And like I said, to the extent that I'd forgotten about, the silly Ray Harryhausen skeleton sequence at the end of the film. It was almost like as they went to like the it's not a junkyard, is it? Well, it is a junkyard, but for cars. An impound, whatever you want to call it. When they get there, I was almost like, oh
no, that wasn't impound. It was a scrapyard.
Scrapyard,
because the cars are on top of it. And what sorry to interrupt you.
No,
what a terrible place to put a child killer's body. Like you're telling me nobody will ever come and go, you know what, that fucking T-Bird over there looks like a nice car. I might actually try and get some parts of that. Oh wait, there's a dead body in the fucking trunk.
It seemed like a silly place to put it. And then when you kind of they establish the whole idea that, Freddy is, I don't know, susceptible to his bones being fucked with in the real world, he goes, again, full Evil Dead at the end. He just kind of screams and shouts in the end after he's killed Donald and, he thinks he's killed Dr. Phil. Yeah. And then his bones just collapse onto the floor. Like, he doesn't even try to hide his own bones. Like, dude, they're just on the floor next to, like, what he thinks two bodies, one human body. Like, someone's going to take those bones and they're going to have a look at them. You might end up, I don't know. I just don't think Freddy thought it through, if truth be told. But saying all that, I'm still of the mindset, going back and rewatching this film, and I've gone back and rewatched some of the sequels, that despite the movies being, sketchy, not sketchy, patchy, that's what I'm looking for, are we of the agreement that, like, Freddy's still the most iconic horror figure of all time? Because when I think of, like, especially the 80s, I think of like the Holy Trinity. And I know Halloween started in the 70s, but it clearly ran into the 80s. And when I think of like 80s slasher, when I think of horror from the 80s, I think of slasher flicks. And when I think of those, I think of Freddy, I think of Michael Myers, and I think of Jason. And the thing is, when I go through those films, obviously their films are, inconsistent at best. But Michael Myers has the best movie, albeit the one from the 70s. I think, on a fundamental filmmaking level, the first Halloween film is the best of the slasher movies. Jason has a hockey mask. His movies aren't great. Has there ever been a great Friday the 13th film? I don't think there has. He just looks cool.
I mean, but Jason doesn't get his hockey mask till the third film, to be fair. He's just...
Yeah.
In the second film, he's a baghead, and in the first film, it's not even him, it's his mother.
It's his mother. Spoiler alerts everywhere. But, and I've actually rewatched Friday the 13th, the 2009 remake, because I always had it in my head that film was actually kind of good. I went back and rewatched the first 15 minutes, because dude, the first 15 minutes are weird because on one level, it's awesome. It's like a mini Friday the 13th film where you have like the final girl, all that jazz, but everyone just gets smoked. And then the film starts again almost post-credits saying, oh, we're looking for, one of the girls. It's the sister, whatever. But basically, you just watch them all show up at Camp Crystal Lake. They all get fucking offed. And the one thing is, Jason is genuinely pretty terrifying in that film because he's big and he's fast. Because it's 2009. This is around the time when they're like, oh, zombies are fast. Now fucking Jason's super fast, but I was just like, man, if he's after you, you are fucked. The only thing is, I was watching it, there's something off about it. It's not just the fact that it looks 2009. I was like, it just looks a bit too glossy and a bit too sexy. I was like, it looks like a Michael Bay film. Michael Bay produced it.
Yeah.
That's why. And it just looks like a Michael Bay film.
You know what that film gave me, of all things, right? There's a song.
Boner.
No,
sorry, that was so... I do apologize. There's so many tits in the... I only watched the first 15 minutes. There's a lot of tits.
And to be fair, from the 15 minutes, you know what I'm talking about. So the one guy with the glasses who goes out to find the weed at the beginning, he's singing into his headphones, isn't he? He's got his headphones on,
Mm-hmm.
he's singing. So throughout life, I know that song. That's Sister Christian, right?
Yeah.
Sister Christian, now your time has come. Well, I always thought when the chorus comes on and it's motoring, what's
Mm-hmm.
your price for life or whatever it is? For some reason, I always thought it was Motorhead.
Oh, really?
So I'm singing Motorhead. And then I watch this film and I go,
It
no,
does
he's not
sound
saying.
like that. Motorhead. See, now you say
He's,
I can totally
yeah,
imagine
but it's
singing
not
that.
Motorhead,
No,
Motorhead. Like a
no,
guy
no.
named
I
Ed.
know it's not, but yeah, but I
No,
can kind of get that.
I think they call in a guy named Ed. Like his name is Motorhead, not
Yeah.
motoring. I don't think it's Motorhead. I think it's Motorhead.
Oh, Motorhead. Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
I think it's a guy named Motorhead.
Oh, good. Oh, that's Motorhead from down the street. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
no. Because the thing is, though, you say that Motorhead. It arguably sounds more like both of those than it does motoring. Like
yeah.
they're forcing motoring into that song, motoring. But yeah, if you kind of just like relax into that song, it definitely sounds more like Motorhead or Motorhead, is now you put it.
I just
But
always
yeah.
thought it was about a guy named Motorhead. Like they were singing about him. But
But anyway, I stand by the fact that Friday the 13th has never had a great movie, but it does have
yeah,
that iconic look.
I mean,
But
Friday the 13th in Space is the best one.
that's a bad film.
Dude, it's awesome.
It's a bad.
I
It's
love
going for the
Jason
guy
X.
who likes the last Friday, Nightmare on Elm Street film. But I do think it's fair to say that of those, Freddy is the most memorable. He's the most iconic. And between like having the first film, which is like you said, not quite as good as Halloween, it's not as well made as Halloween, but it comes down to the premise, I think, being so memorable. Obviously, when you think of Freddy, you think of the glove, you think of the jump in the hat. He's got that iconic look. And one thing all three of those films, all those series have in common, they all have amazingly memorable scores, which I think helps a
Yeah,
huge amount when it comes to horror. But what sets the Nightmare on Elm Street movies aside from its peer, or apart from its peers, is not only the fact that it has that sense of fantasy to it as well. And obviously they push that further and further with the sequels. There's that sense of fun associated with it. But I really think it is the premise and just how scary it is, that just the concept of not being able to sleep. Just the idea that you cannot escape this
yeah.
motherfucker. There's always, if you're watching Michael Myers or you're watching Jason, especially all the films, she's like, just fucking run, just leave. Why the fuck are you, it's always the white people. I don't want to be, like, pretending to be the black guy. Like, what are you crackers doing? Fucking bounce. And they're still there. With Nightmare on Elm Street, you're like, what the fuck could you do? And as I get older, the premise becomes inherently more terrifying. And I don't mean Freddy. I just mean the idea of not being able to sleep. I'm just like, fuck me, man. The idea of like it getting to 11 o'clock and me trying to stay up on a Tuesday, get too fucked. That's just not working when I'm 42.
When the mother turned around and said, "What are you doing? It's almost 1 a.m." I'm like, I've been asleep for 6 hours by now.
I know. I'd be fucked. I wouldn't even bother fighting him. I'd just be like, dude, I'm going to bed at 6 p.m. If he kills me, he kills me. I'm not going to try. I'm not getting killed at 1 o'clock in the morning with my fucking eyes half shut. Forget about it. Although it was quite interesting seeing their different tricks for staying awake. It's like, does she has like
You mean,
a spoonful of coffee?
her tablespoon of coffee, followed by a swig of Diet Coke.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to stay awake, don't you want to go full fat Coke?
Yeah, first, I'm like, you've got to go full fat Coke. Secondly, I'm like, dude, can you not get like a line of Coke or something? It's like, I know, do some speed, anything to keep you awake. I know, ridiculous. But as I said, Freddy, like, this isn't even the best Freddy film, but it is the most, as I say, imaginative of the bunch. And so much of that comes down to those deaths and the premise and the characters. I just think this movie just ticks a lot of boxes.
It is really like, I can't believe how quick it goes as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because Nancy shows up,
Mm-hmm.
and then a day later, she's gone to 2 funerals. And then a day later after that, then she's fired. And then a day later after that, she's dead. And the next day, then. So in 5 days, there's been 3 funerals, including hers. Like, that's quick as fuck.
You start asking questions about her, it suddenly turns into like a Murder, She Wrote situation. Like, every time this bitch shows up, people are just fucking dead. Like, that is the thing. Outright, Nancy would already have a reputation from any level-headed person. They're like, listen, she's gone about this fucking dream dude. All her friends die. She's the only one who survives. Suspect. She then goes to this psychiatric hospital, starts spouting the same bullshit. Immediately, these kids start dying. She's still alive. Surely someone's stepping in and being like, I think this 24-year-old bitch, the one who's pretending like she's 60 years old, I think she might be a murderer,
How quick are they as well to have the funerals? Because everyone's falling asleep, and as soon as you fall asleep, you're attacked by Freddy. So Freddy's not waiting around. So it's not like it's happening in the space of a month. It's got to be happening really quick. But somebody drops dead. The next day they have his funeral. So it's like they knew he was going to this psychiatric place and they were going to die. So they just had the plot ready. Also, if all of your kids are dying in this psychiatric place, if you're not fucking Patricia Arquette's mother, I can't remember her name, sorry. If you're not Kristen's mother.
Nice. I thought you were going for the mother's name. I was like, well, that's a deep cut. I was like, I don't think anyone cares.
If you're not Kristen's mother, won't you be pulling out the kid out of, I don't know, Murder Camp 2.0?
I know everyone's dying. Like this clearly isn't the place for my kids. And it's just the unwillingness. I mean, we mentioned earlier, Dr. Sims. I get it. It's a stretch to be like, there's a murdering ghost man in their dreams who's like offing all these kids. However, the fact that they totally overlook, like, there's one thing when what's his name jumps off the clock tower. It's like fair play. You can pass off Philip as being a suicide. Jennifer, when Larry Fishburne walks into the smoke room, wherever the fuck it is, the TV room, she is a good 4 feet off the floor with her head in the TV. Now, nobody says shit. Nobody questions it. They're like, dude, what would she do? She's like a fucking Air Jordan off the deck, headbutted the TV so hard that she's just fucking suspended midair. Surely someone's like, all right, guys, listen, I'm not saying it's the ghost dude, but how the fuck did she get up there? How the fuck did she get up there and headbutt that TV to death?
Those CRTs as well.
Oh, dude, they're nails.
I hit the glass. Like, I ran into them full force. I've had my brother drive my face into one, and I haven't gone through it.
God, I mean, those news this podcast, the relationship you and your brother had growing up sounds horrendous. I've got a younger brother. We had like fights, and we can have like situations where, people had nosebleeds and people got hurt unceremoniously, blah, blah, blah. But you guys having like brick walls and smashing your faces into CRT TVs, like, what the fuck? I'm amazed you're alive at times.
I got a hard head, apparently.
Apparently so.
Fucking hell, mate. Like I said, they are, as you said, nails. And the fact that you've got to think there's got to be some force driving that into but that effect as well looked fucking great. His arms come out, grab her, pick her up, and then it looks like his face is coming through a condom at first.
It does. It totally does.
And then it molds around his face and it's Freddy, and that's fucking fantastic.
Oh, it looks awesome. As I said, I actually think this whole film looks great until they go a little bit too big with the fantasy towards the end of the film. It all goes back to, is it Will in the wheelchair when he goes like full like fucking wizard master? And like those effects look quite dodgy. And then we've already mentioned when he turns into a skeleton, it goes quite Ray Harryhausen. But even like when she thinks Donald, her father's come back, that all just looks corny as fuck. But then it's like I said, it's offset by the mirror sequence. So there are a few moments when they get maybe their ambition goes beyond their means somewhat for a relatively low budget film from 1987. But for the most part, and when they do keep it purely practical, this film just looks the absolute balls. It looks fantastic.
It doesn't age it at all. Like I said, the only thing that really ages it is, as you've said, the Jason and the Argonauts scene, and probably John Saxon himself, because fucking hell, man, that guy's getting older, isn't he? The dad, Nancy's dad.
I don't know. He's one of those guys, because it's 1987. He could be anywhere between, I'd say, 42 and 67. He's just one of those guys. It was like a tougher time back then. But
I do have to find out how old he was now.
I mean, as I mentioned, Nancy at best is 24. What is going on with her and Dr. Neil? Like, are they dating? There's one point they're having dinner at her place. They go out for a Thai meal, but they're kind of almost suggesting that they're dating, or are they just kind of meeting up for quote unquote business meetings in very kind of personal places?
As my father would say, they're courting. They're starting the courting relationship, I think. They haven't really got to the fucking stage yet.
Don't get me wrong. Dr. Neil, I think that's one of the reasons he's so on board, because they like when they're having their group session without Dr. Sims, and he's like, what the fuck? And she's like, remember, open mind. And it's like, I think he remembers he wants some fucking skirt. I think that's the only reason he's on board.
Because he turned on a fucking dime, didn't he? Because when why is this fucking postgraduate year coming here and getting all this power? And then he sees her and she's, oh, fucking hell, all right, then tits and ass. All right, she can crack on. It's fine.
Yeah, and he's willing to give up his career, like throws everything at it. And then like by the end of the film, when it's him and Donald, he's kind of like fucking, given one, like he's fully aware of the history of Freddy and everything that's going on. He's talking about Freddy's long overdue funeral and stuff. I'm like, dude, you didn't believe in this like 37 minutes ago, and suddenly you're like driving the narrative of this film. It's all very strange. As I said, it's about as strange as just how oddly horny Joey is. So Joey's the mute kid, and his whole shtick seems to be he's mute and he's horny. That seems to be his thing. Which I get it. He's like a
But
teenager,
also,
but that seems to be his whole thing.
what the fuck happened in his life? Isn't a teardrop tattoo because you've murdered somebody in prison?
I was going to say the exact same thing. I never noticed it before. I was watching the film. I was like, that can't be a teardrop tattoo on his face. He does not, like, he's clearly a suburban kid. What the fuck is he doing with a teardrop? Well, this kid didn't do hard time. I'm not buying that at all. It's really strange, an odd choice. And I don't believe for a second that the actor, his name is Rodney Eastman. There's no way a dude called Rodney Eastman has a fucking teardrop tattoo on his face. It's just impossible. I don't. If you went into a tattoo artist and your name is Rodney and you ask for a teardrop tattoo on your face, I reckon they say no. Like, dude, your name's Rodney. You're white as fuck. You can't have this. You just simply cannot have it.
I'll tell you one thing, mind Rodney Eastman himself. He's aged quite well. He's a handsome man now. He's not a silver fox, but his IMDb photo,
he's a skirt getter in this film. I mean, like I said, his whole thing to the point where his whole sequence with Freddy is like tons and sexiness. Like that's his vibe.
He's the star of a film I really want to see, and I've never heard of it, but it sounds right up my alley. So in 1989, there was a film called Deadly Weapon. And the synopsis is a teenage boy who's bullied both at school by the seniors and at his home by his abusive father finds an experimental laser weapon in a river and ponders revenge. The army general who lost the gun sends his units after the kid. I mean, that sounds right up my street. A kid finds a laser weapon.
That sounds like the movie you would make if given the budget. Jesus Christ.
And his character's name is Z.
Oh, of course. It's better than Rodney, that's for sure. Or Joey's okay. Joey's a perfectly reasonable name. But yeah, that was maybe my big issue, because I remember, like, obviously, again, going back to the core premise of this film, the idea that these kids get dream powers because of Kristen. I'm like, that's fucking cool. And I remember, when I think of him being dressed as a wizard, the first time I watched this film, I was really young, and it had this whole like Dungeons and Dragons vibe about it. And back then, even though I was never into the board game, it was back when the cartoon was really popular.
Yeah.
So it's like, it kind of had that aesthetic. And then, like I said, I go and watch this film, and none of their magic powers seem to be worth a shit, which was a total shame. That's my real disappointment with this film. It's just like, man, they still look cool. Like on paper, they're okay, other than the aforementioned Kristen can do backflips. Like, have a fucking Uzi instead, for sure.
Isn't her power to draw everyone together? Her magic power is to bring everyone towards her.
I think that's
so they decided that's a bit lame. So her next one is to be the world's worst gymnast. Like when she showed that backflip handspring thing, not only did she gain another 2 inches, but she kind of went out another 3 inches as well.
Yeah, it was quite strange. I mean, in fairness, this is 1987. I think gymnastics was super popular at the time because of a certain, with all the battles with the Russians and all that jazz, and Romanian gymnasts and all that crap. So maybe that's why they forced it into the film. But as a power, it's not exactly the best. But then, like you say, like Kincaid, he's supposed to be strong because he's like big. And I was just like, he bends a chair. That's pretty much all he does.
He bends a chair and he punches what looks like the worst piece of wall I've ever seen. Like it was splintered before he went through it anyway. And also, I
think my favorite thing actually about Kincaid is that he's, and dare I say this, old-fashioned black. When I say black, I mean old-fashioned African American. Like he speaks in that, like it's still a holdover from the 70s. He drops like lines like sucker a lot. He sounds like that kind of guy. Listen here, Freddie, sucker. He's like one of those. I'm just like, awesome, fucking awesome.
What I love as well is if you didn't think like, I wonder what his power is before he shows you. He's a strong man. Well, how'd you guess that? Because he's dressed like a strong man from a fucking 1920s circus.
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose, isn't it? Like nothing really changes from everyone else. Like you say, like Taryn gets like, she gets the hair and the knives. You get Will, he gets it's a dumbass cape, but it's a cape. And then it's like Kincaid, he just says he's strong and bends a chair. That's it. Like he doesn't suddenly become more muscular.
Bend the chair. He just barely bends the legs.
What does he get a vest, or is that a vest he brought from home? I was like, he's so fucking done. Oh, no.
And then Joey finds out he can scream really loudly. Like, okay.
Which is a little bit like bat shark deterrent, remember from the TV show? It's like the shark is biting Batman's leg as Robin's trying to take him away on the helicopter. And he's like, use your bat shark deterrent shit. It's like specifically made for that one situation. It's like Joey has his one moment because he just happens to be in a room full of mirrors, which again is a super cool sequence, but is completely ruined, dare I say, by Nancy. And I hate to say this, but she totally deserves to die at the end of the film. Like this isn't her first rodeo. She should not be like, as soon as they break all the mirrors with Joey's scream, she's just like, oh, he's gone. It's over. It's like, Nancy, come on now. You can't be that confident. What gives you that confidence? And then her magic dad shows up and he's like, oh, Nancy, I just had to say that I love you one more time. And she goes, I was like, it's clearly Freddy. It's obviously Freddy. And when he stabs her, I'm just like, well, bitch, you had it coming. I hate to say she had it coming, but she had it coming. It was complete incompetence on her part.
I know. Like, how does she know her dad? Like, she didn't even question it. Oh, my dad died in the real world. Like, how did that happen? The only person she was with Dr. Gordon. Like, did he do it? Because I didn't think Freddy could come into the real world. Like,
yeah, that's another good point.
And if Freddy can control his fucking bones, why hasn't he done that already?
I have no idea. And like that's a great point. Like, she doesn't even question. She's like, wait, you died? She's none of that. I think she's like, if anything, she's a little bit relieved. She's like, oh, fuck, he's dead. I mean, it's nice that you're coming back and saying, but like, he's a drunk. He's off. I'm glad he's gone. Nancy's just the worst. She's the worst. She gets everyone killed. She is a terrible actress.
She is the worst in this film. Like, honestly.
She's the worst actress in this film. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, maybe that's why she didn't get many more roles. But the one thing Heather Langenkamp does have when it comes to the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and she is iconic. She's not the greatest actress, but she is iconic. And one of the reasons for that is because she has great taste. She's in 3 Nightmare films, and she's in unquestionably the 3 best. She's in the original one. She comes back for this, and then she comes back again for a new Nightmare. They're the 3 best. Like, it's not. You can make an argument for what order the top 3 are in. I think it's pretty standard. I would say 1, 3, and then New Nightmare. But I think you could maybe make an argument for New Nightmare ahead of Dream Warriors. But that's down to taste. But those 3 are definitely the best 3. I don't think there's any question. And she's in the top 3.
No, I'm sorry. I'm still saying Freddy's dead. Freddy's dead is up.
No. That's ridiculous.
Do you know what I found out as well when I was doing Freddy? Breckin Meyer's in it.
Freddy's dead, man. The film is, I mean, it's bad. I think it's genuinely and universally accepted as the worst Freddy film. And there are a lot of bad Freddy films.
I think it's great. I think it's one of the best ones. It's so funny.
Definitely not. I think you need to rewatch that and maybe.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it. Like I've seen that once or twice. More than no. I don't even know the one I've seen the most. Probably this one, and then Freddy's Dead. Probably.
Yeah.
But fucking New Nightmare. I remember liking that. And I remember liking the premise, and I've only ever seen that twice as well. But what I remember about New Nightmare is maybe her acting has improved because she's playing herself. Because she's not as bad in this as she is, but that's got one of the worst child actors as well. That kid in New Nightmare is the kid from Bruce Willis's Mercury Rising.
Oh, yeah.
Mummy, yeah. Simon is home. Simon is home.
God, yeah, he is bad. There are a lot of bad 90s American kid actors, and he is one of the worst of them, sadly. But I remember thinking at the time, because I saw it when it first came out, like 96, 97, and I was like, why isn't this a bigger deal? I remember like that blowing, like I was probably 15, 16 when I watched it. And I was just like, this is such a cool premise. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, they're all playing themselves. And then Freddy comes like into the real world. But like Wes Craven's playing Wes Craven. I know that all might sound a little bit kind of trite now, but in 1996, 7, you might have to double check the year for me. That had never been done. Certainly to my knowledge, nothing like that. It was so meta. It was so clever. And I think one of the big issues was people were kind of over Freddy by that point. It didn't do huge numbers at the box office. And of course, Scream stole all of its thunder. So wait, it was in 95? Or maybe it was earlier. Maybe I'm getting completely carried away with myself.
New Nightmare, you want to know when it was released, yeah?
Yeah. I think I'm
94.
94, there we go.
94, yeah.
So I was ahead of myself. But yeah, by the time 96 comes around, nobody's talking about the meta genius of New Nightmare. Everyone's just talking about Wes Craven's Scream, of course.
I always would have put New Nightmare in mind, like towards the later of the 90s. Definitely, because I think Freddy's Dead came out in like 91. So I didn't think after it was only 3 years, they said, you know what, we'll try a new premise. I thought there was a bit more time between them. I
thought, well, that's where my head was. It was only because as I was talking about it, I was saying like, no. It definitely came out before Scream, and Scream was like 96. So it couldn't have come out before 90. It must have been at least 95. But I was the same as you. I was just like, I must have been like mid to later 90s. But no, obviously not. It came pretty hot off the heels of the last movie. And maybe I think that might have actually been one of its issues. I think if you'd made Scream first and then maybe released a New Nightmare in, say, like 99, 2000, I think it would have been a much bigger hit, because by then people have forgotten the dodge. I know you're a fan of the last film, but the diminishing returns of the later sequels, and everyone's kind of like, I think I'm ready for some more Freddy. And then you come back with this really interesting premise. I think he just went in a little bit too hot. It's obviously a shame that, 2000, I remember really looking forward to the remake in, I want to say 2012-ish or something. And that film just didn't work, did it? It's such a shame. It wasn't even just didn't work. It just wasn't very good. I think that was the big problem.
It wasn't, and I didn't really feel Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy. Like, it just wasn't.
Which is a shame. On paper, I totally got it. When I heard Jackie Earle Haley was going to be Freddy, I was just like, that's good casting. That felt like good casting.
But I'm with Robert Englund. If they do a Freddy again, or Robert Englund's already said his dream casting, and it's Kevin Bacon.
Oh, Kevin Bacon,
awesome. Freddy. That'd be fucking fantastic.
We'll get to that. Hope to future.
So before we move on, the only thing I want to say: did you see who the writers were of this? Wes Craven, obviously. Did you see one of the other writers?
Oh, yes, I did. You have to save me from myself.
Frank Darabont.
That was it. Yeah. Again, Frank Darabont, a fantastic track record when it comes to these things. And again, you can feel it in the film. This is somebody who's stepped in and they've just added a bit of quality to the premise. They've taken the premise and they've evolved it. But like you said, most importantly, they've kept the elements of horror, and they've kept Freddy the right side of serious. They've made him more of a character. He does start saying bitch. You mentioned on the last podcast, you can find these like cuts online of just Freddy saying bitch every 2 minutes. That kind of came in more prevalently in the later films. He says it a couple of times in this, including the quote, the very famous quote from this film, maybe arguably Freddy's most famous quote, I'd say, "Welcome to prime time, bitch." But you've got that writer who knows how to keep it the right side of horror, but also to have some fun with it. So it's just you can see, like you said, quality writers, solid director. I mean, this is the guy who did he did the Blob remake.
Chuck Russell, yeah. This is the reason why this came up on our radar again, because when we did the Blob, we talked about the films he's done, because he did like Mask.
The Mask was a massive hit. He did the Scorpion King, I want to say.
He did the Scorpion King,
which wasn't a fantastic film, but it's pretty well put together for all intents and purposes. So this is it's a talented director with a largely talented cast. He's got a good writer on board, and what you end up with, a really good movie. It's like you throw a bit of money, a bit of talent at these ideas, and you can bring them to life again. Because like the first film is famously Freddy, the guy who saved, or the guy who built New Line Cinema. Freddy 2 didn't do great business and was already starting to feel a little bit stale. And then they come back with this and do something super interesting. Obviously, with the other sequels, they just kept going bigger and sillier until eventually it just becomes, a joke in many respects, I suppose. What's the word I'm looking for? A parody of himself. Thank you so much. I didn't think I gave you enough information to get that right then. So good on you, man. Good on you. Is there anything else you wanted to add about the film before we move on?
No, I've covered all the notes and everything I wanted to mention, so I'm happy to move on to next.
Oh, the only thing I did want to mention: did you watch the Dokken Dream Warriors music video? Fuck me!
No,
this film is really 80s. In case you hadn't noticed, it's fantastic, but it's very 80s. The Dokken are a hair metal band, and it's one of those. I wish these music videos still existed. So it's called Dream Warriors. It's just named after the film. Straight away, I'm on board. It's them with their big hair singing directly down the camera, whereas 90% of the music video is just the movie. And they used to do that all the time. They would just show you huge swathes of the movie in music videos. And I used to fucking love those. And they've just gone away. And I'm just like, so yeah, if you get a chance, check out the Dokken music video for Dream Warriors. Absolute gold.
I have to take us on a tangent now. The most insane music video that I've ever seen, and I think we've already mentioned it on episode 1 of this podcast, was Cindy Crawford's Goonies Are Good Enough. Cyndi Lauper, sorry. Goonies Are Good Enough. Where it's WWF wrestlers versus the Goonies.
It's bonkers. If anything, I'm not sure.
About?
Have you seen the Mr. McMahon documentary?
I have, yeah.
It reminded me of just how involved, suddenly that music video actually makes a bit more sense. It doesn't make any sense as to why it would be for the Goonies, but Cyndi Lauper was massively involved in the WWF for a number of years. She was on the show, she got involved with the wrestlers, all this kind of crazy shit. So suddenly her being involved with wrestlers in a music video makes a lot more sense. However, her being in a music video with WWF wrestlers for the Goonies still makes no fucking sense. What really makes this magical, of course, is that the song just happens to be a complete fucking banger as well. So,
Oh,
it's
awesome.
just like, it's all those things I love as a kid. I'm just like, well, Cyndi Lauper, it's WWF wrestlers, it's the Goonies, and it's a super catchy, super 80s song. I fucking love that song. Awesome. So Docket's good. It's not as good as Cyndi Lauper, good enough for the Goonies. No way.
Yep, sorry, took us down the wrong path.
Oh, dude, if you're going to take us down a tangent, take us down the Goonies tangent with Cyndi Lauper and the WWF wrestlers. I'm all for that. Favorite scene of this film? For me, it has to be one of the death sequences. We've obviously mentioned most of them. The opening dream sequence is cool. The penis Freddy and the barking pig is ace. But the correct answer is the tendon death sequence. It just, like, when I think of this film, I always think of that death sequence. Yeah. And when I was younger, it was one of the few, because I was never squirmish as a kid, but I remember like certain sequences getting to me. It was Murphy getting murdered at the start of RoboCop when they all just line him up like a death squad and shoot and like block his hands. I remember being like, "Well, that's fucking nasty." It was bizarrely the sequence in Aliens where Ripley's dreaming and she pulls up a top and her skin starts stretched like the alien's about to burst through, but it doesn't. There was something about that freaked me out. And there was the tendons sequence in this. I was just like, it's just fucking gross. And I was very happy to see that it's still gross in 2024. So that's my favorite scene.
Mine is a death as well. I knew you were going to go the tendons one, so I wanted to go somewhere else. And it had to be the weird, sucky track marks, let's get high needle death.
It's great shout. Because like that whole sequence is awesome.
It looks absolutely fantastic. Again, she has no power. Like her power is, I've got switchblades,
tiny knives, and giant hair. But I even love, like, again, we mentioned with the whole docking thing, like how 80s this film is. It's never more 80s than when they create the quintessential 80s alleyway for her to fight Freddy in.
Yeah.
It's all neon signs and smoke. Everything looks like black rain. I actually watched it's something about that time in cinema, Blue Steel with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
And that's all bathed in the same kind of light. There's just too much light. It's too much both dark and light at the same time, if that makes sense. And it's just one of those classic. And there's always smoke coming from fucking somewhere. Awesome. Love that sequence.
I mean, it looks good. When he goes, like he says something and their arms pop up. And then you just see and they're sucking. And then his fingers turn into the needles. He's let's get high. And I expected a bitch after that, but it didn't happen. And then he jams into her arms and she ODs.
Hey, presto.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. At least that sequence was cool because some of the ones towards the end, I keep going back to the Will sequence where he turns into a wizard. Not only is him turning into a wizard pony, but his death is just that classic. He just gets stabbed, and you can even see the wire holding him up at that point. I'm just like, that looks pony. And when Donald gets killed at the end, Donald's like one of the characters from the first film. You think he's going to get this big send-off or this big dramatic death. He just gets stabbed as well. And you think of just how dramatic and imaginative most of the kills on this film. To get to that are just so by the numbers was, if anything,
it's 3 as well, because Heather gets, not Heather Lang, Nancy gets stabbed.
Yeah, she does, doesn't she?
She gets stabbed. Okay, she comes back for a little bit at the end, but she's stabbed. She's done. She's dead.
That's the one I would allow because she's like the classic original girl. That's the original.
And I think she needed a more dramatic death if she's the final girl of the original, not just a stab.
Yeah, but I didn't mind that because I don't want to see her go out in something gross. I think it serves a purpose in that sequence because he stabs her, but then that gives her just enough life so she can kill him. So she still has her moments. That I can get on board with because she's the original final girl, blah, blah, blah. But with the other guys, it's just like, dude, like you've had so many imaginative kills and you're just going to have 3 stabs. I'll have 1 stab. Have it on Nancy. The other 2, you've got to be more imaginative. But hey ho, this is supposed to be favorite sequence, not fucking worst. Love's number 1 memorable cast of kids. Not only the memorable, but they all have that impact of other than the ones we literally just mentioned, largely memorable kills combined with largely memorable cast members. That's what makes a great horror film in many respects. That's what makes it memorable. And that leads into number 2, great and imaginative death sequences. There's so many. We've already listed them, so I won't go through those again. And number 3, I think this is maybe the most important, beyond the fact that it's well directed, well written, blah blah blah. Tonally bang on between comedy, fantasy, and horror. Especially Freddy, as I said, who still feels like mean and sadistic rather than slightly goofy. So I think that's maybe the most important thing, is that this, of all the sequels, feels like it got the tone bang on.
So number one for me is, and we haven't talked about much randomly considering it's his film, Freddy. Rob Englund as Freddy is perfect for this. Like, just always in shadow. And the one thing that never worked as it goes on was they kept changing how his burns looked. He started to look less and less burned and more shiny as the films went on. When you get to Freddy's Dead, that's the only issue. It just looks like, I don't know, he's got a bad suntan. Yeah, it's so. But Freddy in this is fantastic.
Yeah,
the practical effects I think are fucking amazing. When they still, I've said it twice already or three times. It doesn't age the film at all. That's the good thing about practical effects. They just look great. How they did it with the tap knife finger thing was great at the dream sequence at the beginning. The as you said, the penis snake was great. The tendons, everything. The practical effects are great.
We've said this before on the podcast many times. Like, the best examples, like if you get really good practical effects, what you can end up, and especially if the film is directed well, and this film's directed well. It's not like the best directed horror film of all time, but it's well directed. Is that you can almost be tricked at times into thinking, oh, this could be a movie made today, but set in the 80s. That's this movie at its best. It doesn't always quite reach those heights, but at its best, and when the physical effects are on song, you're like, oh, this could have been made yesterday. It's like, if you added special effects to this, it would just make it look worse. So,
and number three, same as you said that the deaths, the imaginative deaths, but in the first half of this film, when you get to the second half, they start to just get a bit lame.
Yeah, it's like they've run out of ideas almost. It's weird. It's very it is. You are right. It is very front loaded. In terms of
they've blown their load at the beginning, and they've just
both imaginatively, budget wise. I don't know. Frank Darabont was only in for a few days. He only wrote half the script. Who fucking knows? But nearly all the best kills are in the first 45 minutes for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of hates, the Amanda Krueger side story just disappears, and then you suddenly get like the lame ass, the headstone. It's just like, oh my god, she was dead all along. Credits, fucking lame. I've mentioned it a bunch of times. Will's wizard cloak is just pony. Number three, Nancy should have known better at the end. She, I agree with you. She maybe deserved a more heroic death, but what she really deserved was not to be such a dumbass. I didn't mind the stab. I'm just not happy with the idea that Nancy could be that naive at the end of the film. There's just no excuse for it. And I'm just going to throw in a fourth. It really is lending into exactly what we were saying there, and the point you made just a moment ago is the fact that the ending to this film is easily the weakest part. But I am going to give it a slight free pass, because the hardest thing to do in any horror film is always land the plane. Because inherently, at some point, you've got to explain it away. You've got to have a bit of closure. And it just always becomes a bit dumb. In a perfect world, and of course, most films couldn't get away with it. The reason that, say, the Blair Witch Project works so well is because it just ends with a dude standing in the corner. And there's no answers. And you're just like, what the fuck? That is so messed up. If you try to explain it and like sequels and stuff, you show the witch, it all starts losing its impact. You just want it to become vague. But because this is a big budget, a relatively big budget, horror film, you've got to have some kind of finale, some big showdown. And it always gets a little bit silly. And that doesn't excuse, of course, the fact that the kills get lamer as the movie goes on. So, But I am going to say that the last act is my fourth hate, sneakily.
Fair enough. Heather Langenkamp's acting is awful. Just Nancy is fucking she's not good in this.
The thing is, she is likable. I'll give her that. She is likable, and maybe it's just because she's pretty. I don't know, but I was watching this and I was just like, "Fuck, was she always this bad?" She's just, and maybe it's just because there's better actors in this film. Although Johnny Depp was in the first one, I don't know, but it just. I think part of it is, you give actors and actresses more of a free pass when they're like 16, 17. But when she's playing ostensibly an adult in this film, you're like, man, she's not great. But hey ho.
Number two, she was a ghost all along, like you said, with the nun. Like, oh my god, it was just ridiculous.
I didn't mind so much that she was a ghost all along. It's like it's pretty clearly signposted that she's going to be linked to Freddy Krueger
when nobody else is talking to her.
Well, and she just keeps fucking appearing in just random ass places. But the way they did it at the end, where like I said, they really did. Like, it felt like they phoned in the final act of this film, and he just looks over. It just happens to be there. It's like, oh, fancy that. It just Not great. Not
It
great.
was when he said to her as well, "Oh, you volunteer at the hospital. I've seen you loads of times. Oh yeah, when I'm needed." So she's only coming to him, and way before these kids were dying, apparently.
Is this they suggesting like she just kind of cuts about and she's like a helpful ghost nun? Is that what they're trying to say? I
I don't
think.
know. Yeah,
I don't know. Again, it's totally underwritten that whole section. I feel like there's probably 2 or 3 scenes on the cutting room floor with more Amanda Krueger. I'd be amazed if there isn't. I'm sure there's more in the script, but they obviously wanted to keep the time down. And we are picking this apart because it's a podcast and that's what we kind of do with these films. But watching it, I don't really want 20 minutes of Amanda Krueger. I'm like,
no,
I'm
no, no,
fine
no.
with the amount that they have. But when you stop and you actually think about it, you're like, this is kind of dumb.
I don't think you need it. You've got the name Freddy Krueger. Just go into the library, go use the old microfiche thing, find out what happened to a mother. There you go. Happy days. You don't
I just
need.
love the 2024 version. What's your name? Amanda. Wait, Amanda. Oh my God. Krueger. Just get game
Yeah.
over. Mobile phones just ruin horror films, sadly.
Uh, sorry.
That's right.
And finally, the deaths in the second half. If I'm gonna have a love as the deaths in the first, then the deaths in the second half will just
Completely reasonable.
like I said, they just blew their wad and they just needed to get them done and get it over with. So
Yeah, the second, especially as I said, the final act does feel somewhat rushed. And as even the stuff with Donald and Dr. Neil, that all just feels weird. Any alternative titles to this film? I assume that'll be like Nightmare on Elm Street 3, not the Dream Warriors.
or it could be the Dream Warriors, just in a different fashion.
Oh, okay, fair enough. In a different font, does that count? It's
Yeah.
the same, it's just in a different font.
French Canadian,
Famous French Canadian, yeah.
Freddy 3, Claws of the Nightmare.
But it's actually called Freddy 3.
Freddy 3, Claws of the Nightmare.
That's what I thought it might be. Like in other countries, they just call it Freddy because it's almost it's like, all I can think of, the closest thing to this is like Rambo, where it was called First Blood. And then it was like First Blood Part 2. And then they suddenly changed it to Rambo First Blood because they're just like, listen, we're selling this suddenly on Rambo. With this, it's like a Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a cool name. But Freddy became the thing, the culture, the pop icon, whatever you want to call it. Pop culture icon. Jesus Christ, got there eventually. So yeah, I can see why other countries might have even retrospectively gone back and changed the name to Freddy something.
China, Ghost Street 3.
Oh, or you could just go for that one. Ghost Street 3. That fucking I'm all on board with that one.
Colombia, Endless Nightmare 3.
Oh my God. I didn't think this was going to be there was going to be so many variants.
Croatia, Horror on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors.
That's okay.
Denmark, Murderous Nightmare 3.
Yeah, they're getting lamer now.
Finland, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Warriors of Dreams.
Just changing that's change for the sake of change as far as I'm concerned.
France, different to French Canadian randomly. Or is it? No, sorry, it's not. Obviously, it's Freddy 3, Claws of the Nightmare.
Fair enough.
Germany, this is going to be a translation issue. Nightmare 3, Freddy Leapt, Lebt.
Yeah, that's got to be something. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
What else have we got here? Dream Warriors, Warriors of the Dream. Terror at Elm Street 3, Freddy's Return from Norway.
Quite like that one. A little bit overblown, but sure. But then when you actually say it, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, it's a long-ass title.
Yeah. Romania, The Nightmare of Elm Street 3, The Dream Fighters.
That sounds like the slightly sneaky knockoff version, where it's almost the same. It's like, when you get a fake pair of Jordans and he's got the ball in the wrong hand or something. It's just feels like one of those.
The Sveds, Sweden, Terror at 3, Elm Street, Freddy's Return.
Terror at 3. Oh my God, there's a lot going on there, yeah.
Yeah. You want a lot going on? Let's move on to Taiwan. Ghost Goes to Bed in the Middle of the Night 3.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I hope that's fucking true. I mean, we're not exactly doing much research beyond reading these off a list, but I like that one, and I really liked China. I thought that one was ace.
What was China's again? I had China.
Ghost Street or whatever it was?
Ghost Street 3, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Simple, but very effective. Very effective. Any facts for this film?
Yep. So on the VHS release, the music... Oh, you've already done that one. Oh, no. On the VHS release, the music video for Dokkan's Dream Warriors appeared after the credits. The video contains many scenes from the movie and ends when the band vanquishes Freddy, causing him to wake up from his nightmare and ask, who were those guys? Despite them telling him the whole song that they're the Dream Warriors. So it was actually on the credits of the film
It's awesome.
in the
Well,
VHS copy.
I
Yeah.
bought the for this film. I was looking for an excuse for ages. I bought like the Blu-ray set of all the movies, and there's actually quite a few cool special features for this film. So I watched them, and one of them was just a music video, which was very ace.
So the Freddy glove from this film was actually stolen. It was stolen from the set, and it was found in another movie. It was hanging on the wall of the work shed in Evil Dead 2.
Yeah,
It
I
was
always knew that that was one of those things, like one of those Easter eggs, but I thought that was more purposeful rather than it being stolen.
It'd been stolen and just hung up.
Awesome.
It was part of a continued banter between directors Wes Craven and Sam Raimi. Yeah,
Very
what
cool.
else we got here? Jennifer Rubin was told by some of her fans that her character of Taryn had caused them to quit drugs, and the actress is very proud of the fact.
She's actually really good in this one as well.
Yeah,
I mean, I know
yeah.
we made jokes about her tiny little knives and ridiculous hair and stuff, but she's one of the best characters in the film for sure.
For 1 week during filming, Robert Englund was working 24 hours every day. By day, he was wrapping on filming of his television series Downtown, and then would report to the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 set at nights.
Unbelievable. And that's like you said, you kind of like mentioned it briefly, but we get caught up in all the different characters because the one kind of constant through most, other than the remake, of course, is that Robert Englund is Freddy. But you watch this film, you're like, it's not just the premise or the character being like created. It is very much his performance makes Freddy. And you needed almost a remake to remind you, it's just like, oh no, this has to be, Robert Englund. There's something in his performance which makes Freddy. It's not the makeup, it's not the hat, it's not the glove. It is very much Robert Englund making that character.
The fire department was always on set during filming of the boiler room scene. The smoke from the machines nauseated many of the actors and actresses.
Poor
So there's
Joey
a lot of people
hung up in there in his weird tongue slave sequence. It's very strange, very strange. I mean, there's a lot of sexual iconography throughout like all the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I mean, they're teenagers and it's in dreams. It feels like that's an essential part of the series. But with Joey, it really is. It's right there. It's very unsubtle.
Around the 38-minute mark, Jennifer is watching the movie Critters.
Awesome.
The original Freddy snake unintentionally came out looking too phallic. The crew only had 1 hour to film the scene, so they didn't have enough time to paint it. So it was covered in a green goo substance to overcome the pink hue. The scene involving the Freddy snake attempting to swallow Kristen was also filmed backwards and then played in reverse due to the gums on the puppet being too flexible and were folding over themselves.
But it looks cool. Again, another great physical effect. Whatever you might say about how much it looks like a dick with a face, it looks awesome. It looks super effective. It just wouldn't be the same if it was in CG. It just wouldn't. It might look more realistic in its own way, but there'll never be that tangible element of where that poor girl is inside that dick face thing. It just has a different impact. That poor girl, Patricia Arquette. I do know her name.
This is the first movie to call him Freddy, because in the first two movies they just called him Fred Krueger.
Oh, fair enough. You see, getting more relaxed at this point, aren't they?
Yeah,
more chilled.
And then we start getting more bitches towards the end of the run.
Mm-hmm.
The film marks the first time to show Freddy using his victims' weaknesses against him.
Cool.
What else have we got here? Winona Ryder auditioned for the role of Kristen, but director Chuck Russell felt that Ryder was too young for the role. Ryder would later become engaged to Johnny Depp, who starred in the first film of the series. I mean, you don't need that second part. Who she's fucking off screen.
I see there is a connection to some, but I mean, don't be wrong. I think she would have been really good in this film, but yeah, she might have been a smidge too young in '87.
In France, the movie was titled Freddy 3 Closes the Nightmare. We already said that.
Awesome.
I was just going on. Oh, one we didn't get from my list of alternative titles. In Japan, the movie was retitled Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Tragedy House.
No, I quite like that one as well. That was pretty good. Hug to the Future. So it's where the whole remake, sequel, Let It Die or Leave Well Alone. This is an interesting one because obviously there's a whole bunch of sequels. There's been a remake. There's even been like the whole meta reimagining of Freddy. Has he run his race? I mean, like you said, the remake didn't work. They've already done the postmodern thing with New Nightmare. England is 77 years old now. Do we just call it a day? Or do you think there's like a talented director out there? Is the most important thing getting in a talented new director, or is it bringing back Robert Englund? I don't know. Like, do you want to see old ass Robert Englund? I think it could still kind of work because he's under prosthetics and stuff.
So for me, I'd say James Wan or Lee Winnell. They're doing very good things with horror. And Lee Winnell would do it more, what's the word, low budget esque, because he does it a lot of the Blumhouse stuff. He's doing Wolfman at the
Yeah.
moment, Invisible Man.
Mhm.
And if you're going to do it, do what Robert Englund said. Just give us Kevin Bacon as Freddy. Because I think that guy would fuck. That's the only way I want to see a new remake. I don't need
Because
any more
I'm
Freddys.
not as big. What's his name? Wan, the director. Sorry,
James Wan.
James Wan. I'm not the
Yeah.
biggest fan of his horror films. I don't like dislike him, but I'm not as in love with him as
I've
other
never
people
watched
are.
him, but I know he's good at horror.
But he is quite good at horror, even though it's not completely to my taste. But he is visually imaginative, so would probably lend himself well to the nightmare kind of template, I suppose.
Yeah.
But now that you've said that, I'm like the Bacon thing feels like an absolute home run waiting to happen. Like you can totally see Kevin Bacon absolutely knocking out the park.
And he'd fucking love it as well. He would just look like his character from Tremors, wouldn't he? Who's just gone into the dream world.
I don't want to see a low budget version either. I don't. I think the whole point is you can go wherever you want. You can be as imaginative as you want to be. You can be as gross as you want to be. And I think it doesn't need to be mega budget, but I think it needs a budget behind it. I would love to see a commitment to physical effects, something along the lines of like Alien Romulus. In terms of like both, you probably wouldn't get as much of a budget because you're very unlikely to make 300-400 million out of a Nightmare on Elm Street film, but a commitment to practical effects, but also enough of a budget to do it justice. But yeah, you've got to get Freddy right. That's the one thing we learned with, Robert Hill. I actually thought on paper, as I mentioned earlier, would have been a good Freddy. It didn't work out. You've got to have someone with both menace, but just that little bit of charm. I think maybe that was the thing he was missing, that twinkle in his eye, or a somewhat malicious twinkle in his eye. You don't want to turn him into a cartoon character. Yeah, you totally sold me on Kevin Bacon. So while my first response was probably leave well alone, if you can get Kevin Bacon, you can get a decent director and a solid budget behind it. I want to see more Nightmare on Elm Street. It's been long enough, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it had diminishing returns and people have different opinions, but they proved that if you come with the right idea, like the Halloween movies did big bang, the last three, especially the first two. I know people weren't so fussed on the third one. Halloween Kills, was it the third one? But those films did, major box office. So there's obviously still an appetite there for these guys. So yeah, hopefully someone can come out and I'm sure it's not, this isn't the last time we'll ever see Freddy. I'd be amazed if somebody doesn't give it another bash.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be the last time we see him either.
Yeah, make a change. So if you could only make one change to make this movie better, there are a few things, but I'm going to say the finale feels a tad rushed and has too much emphasis on Donald and Dr. Neil. And as I've mentioned numerous times, the whole Amanda Krueger thing, do it properly or not at all. But yeah, I just think the final sequence in particular, the final act, dare I say, because it's not just a sequence, the final act is far too rushed, sadly.
The right answer is get rid of the Harryhausen-esque fucking...
That's part of it, but yeah, that is correct.
But the joke answer is make Taron's knives bigger. Give her a fucking machete or something.
Well, that's on Taron. It's just a sheer lack of imagination on her
Make
part.
them the size of your hair, love. Like you made your hair massive. Make your hair blades.
They're so small. They're the smallest knives. She stabs Freddy, and it's just like, you're not going to get any decent purchase. All that is inconvenient. It's going to hurt for sure. You get that with a machete, you could do some serious damage.
Like a mohawk as knives, and then she can just headbutt him.
Anything. She needs to be more imaginative than I've got a cool haircut and tiny knives. It's on her. In terms of video games, there was a 1990 video game developed by Rare for the NES of all things. There was also one in 1989 for the Commodore 64 and IBM PC. None of them were very good, sadly. If I was going to do one today, the obvious answer, again, with these horror films is to go for the whole asymmetrical thing a la Elphonic's Friday the 13th. But with this, you could actually do something interesting because you could give the survivors or the kids, magical powers. You could have like proper sized knives or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I'd actually like to see, because I'm not a big fan of those, is say if you got like Blooper Team and Konami to do something akin to Silent Hill, only, instead of the whole like, the horn goes off and suddenly you're in Silent Hill and it all goes horrific. You're trying to deal with your everyday life, but you're constantly fighting against a sleep meter. And certain things can happen in the day which can kind of push that forward. And you've got to do tricks to try and keep yourself awake. And there'll be points in the game when you don't realize if you're actually still awake or if you're dreaming. And then, of course, it goes full Silent Hill with, when you unequivocally are asleep. And then it becomes more like Alien Isolation, where you've just got to survive Freddy for the most part, and
Yeah.
maybe later in the game, kind of like how the best Resident Evil games or the most modern ones evolve, where you feel really vulnerable at the start of the game, and then by the end you got fucking grenade launchers and magic powers, and you can potentially fight off Freddy. So that's probably what I'd go for.
Sometimes I don't like you going first on this. You steal my ideas. Like Life
I
is
do
Strange,
apologize.
you had
Hmm.
that one, and obviously Silent Hill was the right answer because I had it as well. The
And you're playing
nightmares.
Silent Hill at the moment, in fairness,
I'm
aren't you?
currently playing Silent Hill 2, yeah, at the moment. But the nightmare Silent Hill place, wherever
Hmm.
it is perfect for the dream world, the boiler room
Yeah, totally.
esque stuff. So it's spot on the right idea.
Yeah, I just love the idea of it like being like almost because obviously with Silent Hill it goes from grim to really fucking grim,
Yeah,
whereas this could be like much more lighthearted. And you almost have to have like a sim element where you've got to get through your day and stuff, and like I said, use tricks to keep yourself awake, blah blah blah. But then when it goes horror, you suddenly find yourself in like the boiler room fighting Freddy and stuff, and you'd
yeah.
have the two worlds. But yeah, I'd still like to see it kind of Blooper Team, Konami, big budget, all that jazz. Best and worst of IMDb. This is going to be interesting because like again, I can imagine some people like properly loving this film and maybe giving it 10 out of 10, but 1 out of 10. I'm sure there are a few out there.
Oh, actually, so there's 446 reviews in total, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 10-star reviews, there's 56 10 stars.
Yep, that sounds about
Okay.
right.
So I said I picked one at random.
Yeah, go for it.
Freddy at its best. Let's be real. This is the best nightmare movie of them all. I dare to say it is even better than the original. This movie is Freddy Krueger at its best. He's still menacing, but also sarcastic at the same time. It also has the strongest characters, acting, and special effects in their entire franchise. Also, Doken rocks. The only reason why this
I'm
is rated.
agreeing with all this. I'm on board.
Is this you, by the way?
Other than I wouldn't say it's better than the first one, but everything else is gold.
The only reason why this is rated lower than the original is because it is the third movie in a slasher franchise. But this movie is not your typical slasher and sequel and should definitely be regarded as a classic alongside the original.
Yeah.
That's one of our latest ones as well, January 16th, 2021.
And
Usually we get it from the early 2000s.
I agree with that. And if somebody like, if you told someone with that opinion, I'm not going to try and talk them off, off the ledge. Like to say that they prefer this to the original isn't an outrageous statement. I'd probably still just about prefer the first one. But this is a really good film, and everything he said stands up. Best kills, great cast, fantastic direction. This is a genuinely good movie, and easily, like I said, there's three brilliant Nightmare on Elm Street films, and if you ask Rob, the final nightmare. Jesus Christ! But yeah, like I'm not quite there with this being better than the first one, but it's really fucking good. And I wouldn't give it 10, but we'll get to that in a moment.
So this is only the third time that we've done the
Mhm.
best and worst of IMDb. So we haven't got much to compare it to, but it said 446 reviews,
Mhm.
one star review.
See, that
Just
sounds
one.
about right.
Yeah.
I thought you might really struggle with this because you get some films where people are just being like douchebag contrarians and stuff. But this feels like one of those films where I'm like, I reckon most people who watch it like this film.
But I don't think this guy gets it. I don't think this guy gets what a
That'll
one
make it
star
even
review is.
better. I'm looking forward to
So,
this.
written on May the 3rd, 2004, Freddy does once flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Mhm.
Spoilers. Philip's death was a sleepwalking accident, nothing more. I'm prescribing Hypnosil. That's a dream suppressant. Freddy, a bastard son of 100 mediums. Some say he was murdered, but no body was ever found. You must find the remains and bury them in hallowed ground. Freddy's back, and this time he's framing kids for their own suicides. Or if they don't die, the evil adults, parents, doctors, psychologists lock them up in a mental institution. These elements are preserved from the first one: cheesy dialogue, hammy acting, the pretense of really difficult issues, which give the actors an even tougher job: suicide, madness, mental institutions. Heather Langenkamp from the first movie, who comes out with such beauties as all you have, that inner strength, some special powers you had in your most wonderful dreams, and imaginative, humorous death scenes. Again, not a one-star review coming out of this for a minute. Stop motion animation is shamelessly used multiple times to create fouler, more imaginative deaths than in the first movie. Dick Cavett turns into Freddy. A puppet turns into a Freddy for a moment. Freddy appears as a giant, greasy killer worm. A sink turns into Freddy, and a TV turns into Freddy and kills a girl who wanted to be an actress in a very Craven-esque self-referential scene. This is it. Jennifer, your big break in TV. It's trashy, cheesy, sometimes gross and freaky, but always fun because it doesn't pretend to be anything else. Look out for Morpheus playing an orderly and cute Patricia Arquette. Where's the one star in that?
Yeah, there's a mistake there. There's a mistake there. So I'm going to go on record and say nobody gave this a 1-star review. Although I don't know why, when you were going through that review, it just suddenly popped into my head that we didn't mention the fact that this film has one of the strangest cameos of all time. Jar Jar Gabor gets killed by Freddy Krueger in this film. What the fuck?
So
It's
I didn't
so
actually
strange.
say it. I didn't actually say it on facts as well, but she's not credited because they didn't know when they were filming it who his guest was going to be. So
Oh, because
when he had his
it's Dick Cavett, isn't it? The talk show host. Yeah.
So when he had his lineup of guests, he decided that Jar Jar Agabo was going to be the one that faces Freddy. So it was done like on one of his actual shows.
Yeah. So random.
They just brought Freddy in to do it. Yeah.
And of course, it might just be complete coincidence. Like it's just happenstance that happened to be. Sorry, that was a horrible sentence. It happenstance that happened to be. You know what I mean? That happened to be Jar Jar Gabor. But the fact that it's Jar Jar Gabor just makes it more surreal and suit the movie in many respects. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to say 0 1-star reviews because that was clearly not a 1-star review. So it'd be interesting to see how many you get where you don't. You'll always get a 10-star review. There's always someone, but a 1-star review. I thought you might struggle with this film. I thought there might be a couple, but the fact that there are really none, despite the fact that this dude goes white, yeah. It's obviously a mistake.
I think you tried to put 10 and just fucking, I don't know.
You just fucked it up. Yeah, it read more like a fucking 8, whatever. For our own ratings and recommendations, pretty easy for me, actually. I don't go, as I say, I don't think it's better than the first film. I don't think this is a 5-star film. I think it's a really good 4-star horror film. Yes, I would recommend it. I have in the past. It's still super watchable. You mentioned it numerous times. The physical effects means it's largely aged really well. It has its problems. We've already mentioned it numerous times, the final act in particular, but this was really fun to go back to. 4 stars and yes for me.
For me, I'm pretty much on board with that, but it's a 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still like it's so pushing towards a 4, but I just couldn't give it a 4. But it's still fun. I still have a great time watching it. I said that it's probably the one I've watched the most. And to be fair, I would probably recommend this because it feels like the actual sequel to the first one. So after you watch Nightmare on Elm Street 1, watch this. Don't watch number 2. And then watch how they kill Freddy and Freddy's Dead because it's fun.
I would go back and watch Freddy 2 is such a weird film because I'd never watched Freddy 2 growing up. For some reason, I watched them like intermittent. Like I watched 1, I watched 3, I skipped 4, I watched 5, I skipped Freddy's Dead. I keep calling the final chapter. I think I've said that numerous times in the podcast. Pretty sure that's a Friday the 13th film. So, and then I watched A New Nightmare. But I recently went back and watched Freddy's Revenge because of its connection to being, let's be honest, gay, for lack of a better term. And there's some unsubtle visuals, should we say, in that film and suggestions. But a very strange film, but it's not actually bad, Freddy's Revenge. It's aged pretty well.
Is that the one? Which one? At the end, Freddy's glove comes through the bus and drives it. Is it that one? Or
I'm pretty sure that because the second one, Freddy's Revenge, it has the bus on the poster. It's got like if nothing else, it's got a really cool poster of a giant Freddy. It's like it's hand drawn by those things, and he's got his claw up in the air, whatever. And it's got the school bus below. And it's just
okay.
Yeah, cool.
So it must be that one, yeah.
Yeah. So same ballpark. I think you might be more accurate, certainly based on my wife's response. She kind of watched it. She fell asleep before the end, and I was like, "Do you want to watch the rest of it tomorrow?" And she's like, "Nah, I'm okay." She thought it was fine, put that way. But I have an attachment to this film, and I still stand by the fact that it's a 4-star film. That is the end of our October season of Halloween podcasts. So back to business as usual next week, and it is your choice, sir. So what are you going to go for?
It is indeed. I'm going to go for the year being 1993.
The year of our Lord, 1993. Pulp Fiction?
Nope, that was 94, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 94.
Yeah.
See, now I'm just thinking 94. I was like, fucking Forrest Gump. That was 94 as well, wasn't it? 93. Well, we've already done the.
I got a feeling I'm doing a couple of 93 films in my next list as well.
All right, I'm going to need some more on that.
Yep, director Joel Schumacher.
93. Oh, Falling Down.
Fucking spot on, dude.
Boom.
I wanted to give you, right? I wanted you not to get that because I wanted to say, the older I get as a 41-year-old man, the more I understand and sympathize with Michael Douglas.
Dude, it is so bizarre. I was talking about Falling Down literally today to one of the guys where I was like, dude, I've got to rewatch this film. And I was saying about how much more relatable it is as you get older. And, when I think of this film,
maybe don't pick up a shotgun and shoot people, but yeah.
Again, exactly what I said. I said word for word. I was like, listen, he takes it a bit too far. He goes, I'm willing to admit, even as an older gentleman now, 42-year-old, he goes a little bit overboard. But the sequence when he's in the car and the way Joel Schumacher films it, you can feel the sweat, the heat, the noise. And then obviously the famous sequence in the, it's not McDonald's, but it's like a fast food place and they won't serve him like because he's like a minute late. Like, I think he went overboard, but I can imagine if I was in that situation and I just happened to have an Uzi in my bag, I'm like, I fucking might. So I can imagine watching this again as a 42-year-old. It's going to be so much more relatable.
We're getting there as well, because I think he was 48, 49 when he filmed this. So
yeah, we're not far off. Obviously, we're going to have to have another conversation. And actually, you came up in the conversation I had where I was like, listen, this motherfucker I did a podcast with, he's trying to convince him that Michael Douglas isn't a movie star. And I was like, dude, look at his IMDb. He's arguably the biggest movie star of the 80s. We'll get into that again next week.
I forgot we had that argument. I might not have pulled Michael Douglas up now. I forgot about that argument.
Pulling up Michael Douglas like me pulling up like Tom Cruise. It just feels like we're asking for trouble. But no, that's a great chat. I can't believe you picked that today because I was literally talking about it literally a few hours ago, which is absolutely insane. So that has been our Halloween season of podcasts. Next week, we are doing 1993's Falling Down by Joel Schumacher with Michael Douglas. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap this up, sir?
Only well done, because I did not know Joel Schumacher directed that film. It totally shocked me when I read that today. So
yeah, it's just one of those. It looks like a Joel. Like when you go back, when you know it, and you go back and watch it, it has those kind of elements. There's something about like the color gradient. It could just be like an early '90s film, but it kind of looks like a Joel Schumacher film. But we'll cover that next week.
I do have something to say. I'm actually struggling at the moment for ideas for our Christmas season. So anybody who has any ideas for Christmas films we haven't already covered, feel free to send them in, and I'll take them on board because I am struggling. I am like, really? I'm trying to think of Christmas films I want to see again.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there's still quite a few out there. We'll find out soon enough. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, please do send them in. Okay, I've been Liam. He's been Rob, and you have been listening to the Hey Guys podcast. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.